Tycoon plans future with Mistress, but his wife sees a video of his triplets with his ex. He was a merchant. Yes, but in Lyran he was more than that. Kale had risen from nothing. A boy born to a dying seamstress in a crumbling cottage, and through wit sharper than any blade, he had built a fortune. He dealt in silks from the Eastern Isles, spices rare and fiery as dragon breath, pearls that glistened like captured moons. But Kale did not want to be rich. He wanted to be eternal. The people whispered his name with awe and fear. Lords courted his favor. Queens accepted his gifts, heavy with hidden meaning. Yet Kale's eyes always wandered past gold and glory, to something more, something untouchable. He wanted legacy. He wanted blood that mattered. And so he married her, Lady Illyra. She was everything he was not: noble, poised, and once promised to a duke. But Kale had conquered the world for her, not with armies but with offerings. He paid off the duke's debts, shamed him in court, and when the man fled, Kale stepped into the light as her savior. And she married him, out of gratitude, perhaps, or maybe because she, too, was tired of playing roles written by others. In the beginning, there was something tender between them, a quietness, a reaching. He would watch her braid her dark hair by the morning light, hands delicate and sure, and wonder if a man like him, built on transactions and vengeance, could ever deserve such grace. But time is a cruel weaver. Kale built her a manor overlooking the city walls, where she could tend her garden and sip imported teas. But he was never home. The ledger called louder than love. The ambition never stopped, and soon neither did the distance. One evening, a storm crawled over the rooftops like a hungry beast. Illyra stood by the stained glass window, her hand pressed gently against the cold pane. She watched the rain fall, the sky bruised and trembling. She turned to him. He had just returned from his journey to the south, his boots still wet, cloak dripping on the marble. "Kale," she whispered, "you've missed the festival again. The twins danced in your honor." His jaw tightened. There are greater honors to chase than children spinning in a courtyard. They're not just children. They're your children. Her voice cracked, barely audible under the rumble of thunder. He didn't answer. Instead, he walked past her, toward the map room. That was always where he went. Not to her, not to them. She followed. "Why do you do this?" she asked, her voice trembling with something that was not anger but sorrow, that quieter, deeper ache. "Why do you look at me as if I'm a stone in your path?" He stopped. He turned. His eyes, usually so cold and sharp, for once betrayed a flicker of something else. Guilt, perhaps, or grief. "I built this life for you, Illyra." "No," she said, stepping closer. "You built it because of me. You never wanted me. You wanted what I meant." The silence between them cracked open like the sky above. From that night on, the warmth between them withered. They dined in silence, slept apart. She would often wake to find the other side of the bed untouched, and the only warmth in the room came from the fire. But Kale, oh Kale, he felt it too. Alone in his halls of gold, he watched the reflection of his face on polished silver, and all he saw was a man trapped by the hunger of his own making. He had everything: lands, gold, a seat at the royal table. Yet none of it could fill the space where love had once tried to grow. Still, he told himself he had chosen correctly. He had married well. He had played the game. He had won. But victory has a taste, and it is never sweet. One day, in the marketplace, as Kale passed through the silk stalls, a voice called out, soft, musical, foreign. "My lord, such sorrow does not suit your shoulders." He turned. She was cloaked in red, with eyes like molten amber. Serana, they called her, a courtesan from Lys, elegant, intoxicating. And when she looked at him, she didn't see a man who had built his world from mud. She saw a king, or so he thought. He lingered. He returned, again and again, and slowly, something inside him began to shift. Where Illyra's gaze made him feel small, Serana's touch made him feel endless. "My name will live forever," he said to Serana once, while lying in her silken chamber. "They will write books about me." She smiled, tracing a finger along his chest. Then write your next chapter with me. That night, Cale stood alone on his balcony, the wind cutting against his face. Below, the city lights flickered. He could leave it all behind. He could start over. She had offered him passion, devotion, even heirs, if that's what he wanted. And so, the decision was made. The next morning, without ceremony, without remorse, he stood before Lady Alira. "I am sending you to the countryside," he said, without meeting her eyes. "Your presence is no longer required at court." She didn't speak. He expected tears, or fury, but she simply nodded. Then, quietly, "Is it her?" He hesitated. Then, "Yes." Still no tears, only a whisper. "Then I hope she loves you more than your legacy ever did." As she walked away, his heart gave a single, uncertain beat. But pride is louder than regret. And Cale, Lord Cale, was never one to turn back. He didn't know then what would come of that choice. He didn't know that far from the city walls, in a small cottage surrounded by wildflowers, Lady Alira would give birth to 3 children. 3 lives he would never meet. Not yet. He didn't know the winds of fate were already shifting, that the price of his ambition was not yet fully paid. He only knew one thing as he watched her carriage disappear into the mist. He had won, and that should have been enough. Alira stepped out in silence. The wind tore at her cloak. She did not look back. Her hands, once adorned with rings of sapphire and gold, were bare. Her hair was no longer coiled in the elegant braids. Even Kayla, with all her warmth, had begun to sense the weight in her mother's eyes. "Something's wrong," she whispered one morning, as they gathered herbs. "I feel it." Alira smiled and brushed her daughter's cheek. "You feel too much, little one." But the truth sat heavy in her chest. That night, Alira dreamed again. The fire in the hearth turned to serpents. The children cried out her name as a faceless man reached for them, cloaked in silk and shadow. She woke with a scream trapped in her throat, sweat chilling her skin. She rose from bed, crossing the creaking floor, and pushed open the window. The wind was howling. In the darkness, something moved by the tree line. A flash of red, then gone. Not a hallucination. Not this time. She whispered a prayer to the moon and closed the window with trembling hands. In the city of Lyran, far from the quiet cottage and the children with eyes like his own, Lord Cale stood before the mirror in his grand chamber. The light was harsh, and he hated what it revealed. His face had aged in the last year, not from years but from silence, from questions unanswered, from the echo of a woman's voice he no longer heard. Alira. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in years, but lately it slipped into his mind when he least expected it. In the middle of court meetings, over letters sealed with wax, in the arms of Serana, who now sat draped across the divan with a goblet of wine in hand, watching him as if she could see every thought he tried to hide. "You're distracted again," she said softly, running her finger along the rim of the cup. "Is it the boy from the east? Or is it her?" Cale's jaw tightened. "Don't be foolish," he replied. "She's nothing now. She chose to vanish." Serana tilted her head. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Then why do you still wake from dreams calling her name?" He didn't answer. The truth gnawed at him, because he had seen the children. Weeks ago, while passing through a border town to inspect a collapsed trade route, he had taken a detour. Not planned, not announced. Something had pulled him toward the hills, a whisper in his bones. He had disguised himself, as he had often done in his younger days, and ridden out alone. And then he saw them, 3 children playing by a river, a girl twirling in a dress too big for her frame, 2 boys, one who moved like a soldier in training, and one who sat with a book open on his lap. He had hidden behind the trees, breath caught in his throat. He didn't need to ask. He knew. They were his, all 3, and Alira alive, strong, holding them with arms that should have been trembling, smiling with a face that should have been bitter. She had done it without him. She had raised them without his name. The shame cut deeper than the betrayal ever had. But worse, he missed it. Their first steps, their first words. their birthdays, their illnesses, their dreams, and no amount of power could buy that time back. He told no one of what he saw, not Serana, not his advisors, not even his own reflection, but it burned inside him like wildfire. Now, Serana approached him slowly, barefoot, her wine forgotten on the floor. "You're slipping away from me," she said, almost gently. "I can feel it." Cale turned to her. There was no softness in his face. "There are things I must reckon with," he said. "Mistakes I buried." Serana laughed, a sound like glass breaking. "Mistakes?" she repeated. "You mean her? Those bastard children? You think they will accept you now, Cale? After what you did? After what you are?" "Be careful," he said darkly. But Serana stepped closer. "I gave you everything," she hissed. "I made you forget her. I made you better." "No," he said quietly. "You made me forget who I was." A long silence stretched between them. Then Serana's eyes narrowed. "If you go to them," she whispered, "you will never return." He didn't respond. He didn't need to, because in his heart he already knew he was going. Not to reclaim them, but to see them. To stand before them not as Lord Cale of Lyren, but as the man who had lost them once. And maybe to ask if there was still a path back. As he left the room, Serana stood alone. And behind her, on the table, a letter sat opened. A letter she had found hidden in Cale's study. A letter addressed to Alira, never sent. She read it again, her nails digging into the parchment, and her lips curled into something sharp. "You won't get away from me," she whispered. "Not this time." The game had changed, but Serana would not lose. Not when she'd come this far. She watched him disappear into the mist, her breath fogging the pain. Then, with a single movement, she crushed the letter in her hand. So it was true. He had written to Alira. He had meant to go back. Even after all she had done for him, her sacrifices, her devotion, her calculated rise. He still sought that ghost from the countryside. Serana's grip tightened. No, he would not leave her behind. Not without consequence. The journey to the hills was long, but Cale rode as if possessed. The rhythm of the horse's hooves matched the pounding in his chest. He barely slept, barely ate. Visions of the children haunted him. Aaron with his sure stance. Darren's curious, calculating gaze. Kayla's wild smile that reminded him, painfully, of Alira. He couldn't stop replaying it. The moment he had seen them, he remembered Kayla picking wildflowers by the stream, her little braids swinging behind her. She had looked up suddenly, staring straight toward the trees where he hid, and for a breathless instant he thought, "She sees me." But she turned away. Back then he hadn't dared approach, hadn't known if he deserved to, but now he needed to know if it was too late. As dusk fell on the third day, the familiar outlines of the old lodge appeared over the horizon. The forest had grown around it, swallowing the edges. Smoke curled from the chimney. Lights flickered behind soft linen curtains. He dismounted, heart hammering. No guards, no dogs, just home. A home he'd abandoned. He took a step forward, then froze. Voices, laughter, and then Alira's voice, low, steady, reading something aloud. A story. He couldn't make out the words, only the rhythm. Her tone. Her breath between sentences. It struck him like a blade to the ribs. She sounded peaceful. He moved closer. Through the window he saw them all. The children nestled around her on a worn rug. Kayla leaning against her shoulder. Aaron whittling a stick with his small blade. Darren curled with a book in his lap. And Alira, her face aglow from the firelight. Her hair longer now, streaked with silver at the temples. Her hands moving as she spoke. Cale exhaled shakily, a sound half sob, half surrender. How had he ever left this? Why had he thought the world beyond these walls could offer more? He stepped back, unsure. Then a twig snapped underfoot. The sound was quiet, barely a whisper, but Kayla's head snapped toward the window. "Alira," she said, tugging her mother's sleeve. "Someone's outside." Alira stood quickly, alert. Cale held his breath. The door creaked open, and there she stood. For a moment, Neither moved. Then her eyes widened. "Kale," she breathed. He removed his hood, slowly. "Alira." The silence between them stretched, heavy with ghosts. He looked thinner than she remembered, older. The fire in his eyes had dimmed, replaced by something raw. She stepped forward, slowly. "What are you doing here?" "I had to see you," he said. I saw them. The children. I saw them weeks ago." She said nothing. He swallowed hard. "I didn't know," he added. "Not until then." She folded her arms. "You didn't know because you never stayed long enough to ask. I tried, Kale. I tried to tell you." His voice cracked. "I was a fool." She laughed bitterly. "You were everything but present. Do you know what it's like to give birth alone? To name them alone? To teach them how to survive while knowing their father ruled half a kingdom but didn't care if they breathed?" His head lowered. "I came to make it right," he whispered. "There's no way to undo what you did. But I want to try." She stared at him, tears rising unbidden. "Why now?" His answer came softly. "Because I see them, and they are better than me, better than what I deserved. Because I miss you." A sound came from inside. Kayla had crept to the door. She peeked out, her bright eyes narrowing at him. "Mama? Who is that?" Kale looked at her, and the air caught in his throat. Alira turned to her daughter. "It's—" She hesitated. And then, with tears in her eyes, she said, "It's your father." Kayla blinked. For a moment, confusion. Then quiet fury. "You left us," she said. "You left her." Kale knelt before her. "I know. I was wrong." She didn't speak, just stared, then turned and ran back inside. Kale remained kneeling in the dirt. Alira watched him. "This won't be easy," she said. "I don't expect it to be," he replied. "But please, let me try." She looked down at him. This man who had once promised her the stars and left her with silence. And slowly, painfully, she nodded. "One chance." He stood, breath shaky. "That's all I ask." From the edge of the forest, hidden behind the trees, another figure watched. Sorana. Her lips curled into a smile that never reached her eyes. "Well, well," she whispered. "Let's see what love is really made of." He hadn't slept much. She'd offered him the bench by the window, nothing more. He hadn't protested. She'd watched him drift in and out of rest, his cloak wrapped tight. His face turned to the glass as though afraid of what might stare back from the dark outside. The children had woken early, all three unusually quiet, the weight of unspoken truths hanging heavy between them. Kayla sat at the table, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. "Why is he still here?" she asked bluntly. "Kayla," Alira said gently, "this isn't a conversation for—" "No," Kayla interrupted, standing now, her voice shaking. "We should talk about it. We're not babies." Darren looked up from his book, his voice soft but firm. "Is he really our father?" Alira glanced toward Kale, who stepped forward then, his voice low. "Yes, I am." Aaron stood slowly from the corner where he'd been sharpening a stick. "Then where were you?" Kale swallowed, his eyes shining. "I was blind. I thought I was chasing something that mattered. I thought I was building a future." "But you left us without one," Kayla snapped. "You left her." Alira placed a calming hand on her daughter's shoulder, but Kayla pulled away, fire dancing behind her eyes. "You think you can just show up and fix everything?" she whispered. "You think just being here now makes up for all the years you didn't care?" Kale knelt then, not out of weakness, but because he could no longer look them in the eye while standing. "No," he said softly. "I don't think that. I don't expect forgiveness. I came because I couldn't live another day knowing I hadn't tried. I lost everything the moment I turned my back on your mother. On all of you." Darren studied him for a long moment, then asked, "Why her? Why did you leave her for that woman in the city?" Kale's voice caught. He looked to Alira, as if asking for permission to speak a truth he had buried for too long. "I thought I needed power, control. Sorana offered me the illusion that I could be something greater than what I was. But I didn't understand. I already had everything. Right here. The room was silent. Aaron, usually stoic, spoke next. If you're really sorry, then stay. But don't try to pretend this is your home again. Cale nodded, shame burning through him. I won't. He rose slowly, every muscle aching from something deeper than exhaustion. I'll sleep in the stable tonight, or the woods if you'd rather. I only ask for the chance to prove to you I can be something better than what I was. Alira's heart throbbed with an emotion she had tried for years to silence. Not love, not forgiveness. Hope terrified her. As Cale turned to go, Kayla whispered, "Wait." He froze. She crossed the room slowly and placed something in his hand. A small wooden carving of a bird. "I made that," she mumbled, "before I knew who you were." Cale looked down at the tiny figure, his hands trembling. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me," she replied. "Just don't break her heart again." That night, Cale lay in the hay loft of the stable, staring at the rafters. Outside, the wind howled like a creature lost. He clutched the wooden bird in his palm, as if afraid it might vanish. And across the field, where moonlight touched the tree line, Serana watched. Wrapped in a cloak the color of dried blood, she crouched by the stream, her breath forming clouds in the cold. The vial glimmered in her hand. She'd been careful, studied the herbs, chosen the blend with precision. It wasn't meant to kill, not immediately, just weaken, confuse, cause sickness, discredit him in the eyes of the children. A man who returned only to fall apart. She didn't need to spill blood, just doubt, just ruin. She waited until the lights in the cottage dimmed, then moved swiftly through the brush. The garden was familiar. She'd watched Alira tend it from afar more than once. Her fingers found the latch to the water cistern. She emptied the vial into the well, her movements quiet, her face calm. By morning, he would start to feel it. And then she would come, not as an enemy, but as the savior, the only woman who truly knew him. Back inside, Alira stood at the window, heart torn. The children slept, their breaths slow and steady, unaware of the storm crawling toward them. She touched the glass, looking out into the night. Somewhere, she still remembered the way Cale used to say her name when no one else was listening. But memories are dangerous when fed by loneliness. And outside, the stars flickered faintly, as if warning her. He sat up slowly, breath shallow. His heart thudded unevenly, and cold sweat trickled down the back of his neck. What was happening to him? He stumbled to his feet, grabbing hold of the wooden beam for support. The world tilted sideways. Aaron's voice called from outside. "Mother says breakfast is ready. Are you?" Cale barely managed a nod through the open stable door. I'll be there shortly." The boy narrowed his eyes, sharp like a blade being honed. "You don't look well." Cale tried to force a smile. "Just a rough night." Aaron didn't answer, only watched him for a few moments longer before turning away. Cale made his way to the cottage, each step an act of will. His vision blurred at the edges. His skin prickled. He felt fevered, like fire danced just beneath it. By the time he reached the door, Alira had opened it, sensing his approach. One look at him and her brow furrowed. "Cale?" "I'm fine," he rasped. "Truly." "No, you're not." She stepped forward and placed a hand against his forehead. It was burning. She turned immediately. "Kayla, bring the herbal tonic. Darren, cold cloths. Aaron, fetch water from the cistern." Cale reached for her wrist gently. "I don't want to trouble anyone." She looked at him, eyes sharp. "You're not trouble. You're just sick. Sit." He obeyed, collapsing into the chair by the hearth, breath shallow. "I was fine yesterday," he murmured, wiping sweat from his brow. "Now I feel like something's clawing me from the inside." Alira's hands moved quickly, grinding herbs, measuring powders, boiling water. She worked with the precision of a woman who had done this too many times, for too many others. But inside, her mind raced. The symptoms didn't feel natural. They came too fast, too sudden. She looked at the water Aaron had just returned with. Clear, normal, but her instinct screamed. "Kale," she said slowly, "have you had anything to eat or drink today?" "Only the water from the cistern." Her blood ran cold. She stood abruptly, stepping outside. The garden lay still. The wooden cover of the well sat askew. She crouched, examining the soil around it, disturbed, and something else. A faint scent. Sweet. Her heart dropped. Poison. She burst back through the door. "No one drinks the water," she cried. "Throw it out. Now." The children froze. Aaron immediately took the pail and dumped it outside. Darren stared at her, eyes wide. "Poison?" he asked, voice thin. Alira nodded, trying to keep calm. "Yes, something's been added to the well. Something meant to weaken, not kill." Kale looked up at her through pale lashes. "Sarana." The name came from him like a curse. Alira turned to him, horror dawning in her eyes. "She followed you?" I don't know," he gasped, gripping the armrest. "But she knew. She knew I was thinking of leaving. She found a letter I never sent." Alira stared at the door as if it might burst open at any moment. "She's not finished," she whispered. "This was just the beginning." Kayla stood beside her, fists clenched. "What does she want?" Kale's answer came slowly, painfully. "She wants to be the only part of my life. She wants to erase everything else." "And if she can't?" Darren asked. "She destroys it." Alira's breath caught. She knew that kind of woman. She'd seen it in Sarana's eyes years ago, the night Kale banished her. The hunger behind the beauty, the violence beneath the lace. Kale grunted, leaning forward, his voice barely a whisper now. "I came to protect you, and I brought the storm with me." "No," Alira said firmly, kneeling in front of him. "You didn't bring it. You only uncovered what was always following." She looked at the children, frightened but strong. Then at Kale, broken but trying. Her jaw set. "We'll fight it. But first, I need you alive." That night, as Kale lay on a mattress by the hearth, his fever starting to break, Alira sat beside him with a damp cloth. "Do you remember?" she asked quietly. "The spring before we married?" He opened his eyes slowly. "The lilies." She smiled, just faintly. "You filled the entire garden with them. You said they smelled like home," he murmured. "You didn't know what home meant back then." He was quiet. Then softly, "I still don't. But maybe I could learn." She didn't answer, just brushed a lock of hair from his damp brow. Outside, the wind shifted. Beyond the trees, a rider dismounted under the cover of darkness. Sarana, cloaked and silent, approached the cottage. She carried no weapon, only a letter. Another knock, delicate, insistent. Kale stirred beneath the blanket, eyes flickering open. "Who?" Alira rose quickly, signaling him to stay down. She moved to the window, peered out through the curtain. A lone figure stood at the threshold, hooded, cloaked in burgundy. The color struck her like a slap. Sarana. She didn't need to see the face to know. There was a stillness around her, unnatural, like the pause before a storm crashes through the earth. Alira's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She reached for the iron poker by the hearth and motioned to Kale with her eyes. "Don't move." Then she opened the door. The moonlight caught Sarana's face, casting half of it in silver, the other in shadow. Her expression was serene, too serene. Her lips curled in a small, knowing smile. "Alira," she said, her voice velvet. "May I come in?" Alira didn't answer right away. The air felt sharp, charged. Her grip on the poker tightened behind her back. "I wasn't expecting guests," she said coolly. Sarana tilted her head. "I know. I wanted this moment to be honest." Alira stared at her. "Honest?" "Yes." Sarana's smile didn't change. "I've come to speak as women, as mothers." Alira narrowed her eyes. "You poisoned the well," she said flatly. Sarana raised her brows, not denying it. "Just enough to slow him down. No harm done. Yet. You should leave." "I will. But not before we talk." Alira stepped outside, closing the door behind her. She didn't want Serana anywhere near the children. Or Kale. The cold wrapped around them like a warning. The moon hung low, silent witness to the reckoning that hovered in the frost. Serana stepped closer, her hands folded delicately before her. "You think I came to beg? Or threaten?" "I didn't." "Then why are you here?" Alira asked. "Because you don't know the man you're protecting." Alira's laugh was hollow. "I know him better than you ever will." Serana's eyes darkened. "You know the man he was, not the one he became." Alira didn't flinch. "He became that man because of you." "No," Serana snapped, her voice cracking, the mask slipping for just a moment. "He became real with me. With you, he was still playing at nobility, still hiding behind the illusion of honor. But I saw him. I gave him everything. And still, he chose to leave." Alira looked at her, eyes piercing. "Then this isn't about Kale. This is about rejection." Serana took a step closer, voice low and trembling. "He was mine. I built him. He wore silks I picked, ate from plates I chose, spoke words I whispered into his mouth. You left a void, Alira, and I filled it." "You filled it with control," Alira said. "You dressed him up like a doll and called it love." Serana's fingers twitched. "You think he's changed?" "He hasn't. He'll stay a while, look at the children, whisper promises. But he'll leave again. He always leaves." Alira's eyes didn't waver. "Not this time." Serana's face tightened, and for the first time, her smile faltered. "I came to offer you a choice," she said finally. "Send him back. Let him return to Lyren with dignity. I'll say nothing of this little interlude." "And if I don't?" Serana's voice grew soft, like silk sliding over a blade. "Then the kingdom will hear about your bastards, and his betrayal, and you will watch your children suffer for the sins of a man who doesn't know how to stay." Alira stared at her, breathing evenly. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, until they were only inches apart. "You're wrong about him," she said quietly. "But worse, you're wrong about me." Serana blinked. "I don't scare easy," Alira whispered. "You can whisper lies into the ears of kings. You can pour poison into wells and lace it with perfume. But I've survived things you couldn't imagine. And if you come near my children again, I will bury you with the same hands that raised them." For a moment, silence. Then Serana's expression shifted, not to rage, but to amusement. She stepped back. "Well," she said lightly, "I see why he still dreams of you." She turned on her heel, cloak catching the wind like blood on silk. "But dreams, Alira," she called over her shoulder, "always end." And with that, she vanished into the trees. Alira stood in the cold long after she was gone. The wind was sharp, but inside her chest, something had settled. Not peace, not safety, resolve. She went back inside and bolted the door. Kale was sitting up now, watching her, pale but alert. "She was here," he said. "Yes." "What did she say?" "She offered me a choice." His voice broke. "And?" Alira looked at him long and hard, then walked over to the hearth. She tossed the iron poker into the flames and watched the sparks fly. "I made mine." Kale remained weak, but the fever had broken. He now sat more often in the cottage's old chair by the hearth, wrapped in furs and watching the fire with eyes dark from memory. The children kept their distance, unsure. Alira kept herself busy, healing roots, repacking medicine bundles, and watching the forest for movement that never came. But the silence was not safety. They all felt it. At dawn, Alira would find Kayla standing by the window, as if daring Serana to return. Aaron sharpened sticks with a precision beyond his years, his shoulders stiff, always near a door. And Darren read with more urgency now. Books on plants, on poisons, on history, absorbing everything with a quiet, desperate hunger. One morning, Kale spoke after a long silence. "They're strong," he said. Alira didn't look up from where she was stitching a tear in Kayla's coat. "They had to be. I don't mean just physically. I mean what they carry." She paused, thread held taut in her fingers. "They carry the truth," she said. Even if they don't understand it yet. He watched the flames. They remind me of her. Alira turned. Of who? My mother. It was the first time he'd ever spoken of her. Cale's voice grew distant, his eyes misting over. She was a seamstress. Poor. Proud. She'd hum when she worked, same song every night. I used to hate it, thought it was weak. Soft. He looked at Alira now. But it wasn't. It was all she had. That thread, that rhythm, it kept her going. Even when we had nothing. Alira said nothing, just listened. When she died, I swore I'd never live like her. I told myself I'd never be powerless again. That I'd control everything. Everyone. His hands tightened in his lap. But all I did was lose the only thing that ever made me human. You mean me? She said quietly. Cale nodded. And them. All of them. There was a long silence, broken only by the crackle of fire. I'm not asking for forgiveness, he said. I know I don't deserve it. Alira stood, crossed the room, and knelt beside him. You're right, she said. You don't. He looked down at her, startled. But you're trying, she continued, softer now. And that's more than I ever thought I'd see. She took his hand in hers. Not as lovers, not yet, but as parents, as people still standing after the storm. Upstairs, Kayla peeked from the railing, watching them. She didn't speak, but something softened in her eyes. Later that afternoon, Cale walked slowly with Aaron through the woods behind the cottage. He carried a small bundle of herbs Alira had instructed him to collect. Nothing special, just something to get him moving again. Aaron stayed quiet at first. Then, did you really love her? Cale glanced at him. Your mother. The boy nodded. Yes, Cale said. I did. I still do. Then why did you leave? Cale didn't answer right away. The leaves crunched under their feet like old bones. Because I didn't know what love was back then, he finally said. I thought it was something you bought, something you earned. But it's not. It's something you stay for, even when it's hard. Aaron looked at the path ahead. Do you think you'll leave again? Cale stopped walking. No, he said. Not unless your mother tells me to. The boy met his eyes, testing the truth of it, then nodded once and kept walking. Behind them, something moved in the trees. A flicker of crimson, unseen. That evening, as they sat for supper, Kayla passed Cale a wooden bowl. It wasn't much, just stew. But he took it with both hands like a gift. Thank you, he said. She nodded, her eyes still guarded but not cold. Darren stirred his spoon slowly. What happens if Serana comes back? Cale looked at Alira, then back at the children. She won't get near you again. You don't know that, Darren said. No, I don't. But I know this, Cale's voice sharpened. If she tries, I won't run this time. I'll stand between her and everything I should have protected years ago. Alira watched him, and for the first time since he returned, she saw not the man who left, but the man who stayed. Kayla looked down at her bowl, then said, almost in a whisper, She scares me. Alira reached across the table and took her hand. She should, she said. But you're not alone anymore. The wind outside rattled the windows, but no one flinched, because inside that small, firelit room, they were becoming something Serana could never break. Family, still wounded, still healing, but together, and somewhere far beyond the woods, Serana stood at the edge of a cliff, looking down at a scroll of parchment, her next move already written. Let them think they've won, she murmured. Her horse stamped its foot behind her, impatient. Inside, the children whispered among themselves, the fire crackling behind them. Cale was at the table, his hands wrapped around a steaming mug, eyes distant. They had all felt it. The stillness was too sharp, too deliberate, the calm before something neither natural nor kind. Alira closed the door, bolted it, and turned to her family. She's watching again, she said. Darren looked up from the book in his lap. How do you know? She doesn't need to be seen to be felt. Kayla swallowed. What does she want now? She's waiting, Alira answered. For us to make a mistake. Kale stood slowly, moving toward the window. She won't wait forever. She thinks fear will undo us from the inside. He turned back to them, jaw clenched. She's wrong. The children didn't speak, but the look they shared was one of something beginning to shift. Faith, maybe. Or resolve. Aaron broke the silence. Can we go outside? Alira frowned. It's cold. And dangerous. I don't mean to play, Aaron said. I mean to train. Kale blinked. Train. With you, the boy said. If Serana's going to strike, I want to know how to fight back. There was something in his eyes. A quiet fire that startled Kale. You're only 7, Alira said gently. Aaron's voice was calm. And she doesn't care. Kale hesitated, then gave a single nod. All right, he said. But we do it my way. They began with wooden swords, branches carved with care, balanced with stone weights. Kale taught Aaron footwork first, the rhythm of shifting weight, the silence between strikes. Not how to win, how to survive. Alira watched from the window as her son moved across the snow. Too serious for a child, too focused for innocence. She wanted to stop it, to tell him to stay soft, to stay small, to stay untouched. But she couldn't, because Serana had taken that choice away from them all. Meanwhile, Kayla stayed close to Alira, helping mix salves and oils. Her hands moved with speed and precision. You have a gift, Alira said, brushing a braid behind her daughter's ear. Kayla looked up. I don't want to just heal people. You don't. I want to protect them. Alira paused, her breath caught. Kayla returned to her task, eyes narrowed in determination. If something happens, I won't hide. And Darren, ever the observer, spent his days reading, absorbing, not just stories now, but tactics, defense, psychology. He brought a book to Kale one evening, placing it silently on the table. Kale flipped through it. Siege patterns, fortification layouts, notes in the margins. Did you write this? He asked. Darren nodded. She won't fight fair, so we won't either. Kale looked at his son with something between pride and heartbreak. You're all too brave for this, he said. Darren met his eyes. You weren't here to stop us from needing to be. Kale didn't respond. He couldn't. The wind howled louder that night. The fire roared, restless. Alira couldn't sleep. She rose from bed and found Kale sitting alone, staring into the flames. You shouldn't blame them, she said softly, sitting beside him. I don't, he whispered. I blame me. She looked at him. There was no crown, no title, no armor left between them. Just skin, just truth. They're strong because of you too, Kale. His lips parted. I never wanted them to need strength. I know. He turned to her, eyes wet. I wanted to give them safety, a name, a world that bent when they spoke. Instead, they learned silence, distance, fear. Alira reached for his hand. You can't change the past. I know, but you're here, and you're trying. That's what matters now. Kale bowed his head. His fingers closed around hers. From upstairs, the floor creaked. The children were awake, listening again. Not out of fear, but because they had learned that truth could come in whispers. Later, in the darkest hour of night, Kayla stirred in her bed. A whisper slid through the cracks in the walls. Not a voice, but a feeling. She sat up. Darren, she whispered. Do you hear that? He was already awake. Yes. They both rose, careful not to wake Aaron. Downstairs, Kale and Alira were asleep by the fire, their hands still tangled together. Kayla crept to the window and looked out into the snow. First nothing, then footprints. Not old, fresh, leading from the woods to the side of the house and stopping, disappearing. No retreat, no return, only arrival. Darren stepped beside her. She's testing the edges. Kayla turned, eyes hard. Then we hold the center, and far away, at the edge of the frozen river, Serana lit a lantern. The flame flickered red, then vanished. She smiled. Let them train. Let them grow. She wanted them strong. Kale stood near the fire, pacing. "She's out there," he muttered. "She's watching us. Waiting." Alira looked up from the herbs she was sorting, her hands steady despite the storm building inside her chest. "I know," she said. "She's closer now. She's getting bold. She wants me to come out," Kale added. "She wants to isolate me, pick us off one by one." Kayla sat near the hearth, holding her little knife. One Kale had carved for her last week. Not for play but protection. "She's not going to wait much longer," Kayla whispered. "I can feel it." Darren closed the book in his lap, his face pale but composed. "Then maybe it's time we stop waiting." Aaron looked up. "What are you thinking?" Darren turned to Alira. "You said something once, that sometimes the best defense is to let your enemy believe they've won." Kale stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "What do you mean?" Darren drew a rough map in the dust on the table with his finger. "We know the woods better than she does now. We know the paths, the ravines, the blind spots. If she thinks she can lure you out, let her, but not alone, not unprepared." Kale stared at his son in disbelief. "You're suggesting we use me as bait?" "No," Darren said calmly. "I'm suggesting we use her arrogance. She thinks you're the weak link, that you'll run to her." Kayla stood, stepping beside her brother. "Then let her think that. Let her get close." Alira's heart pounded. "I'm not sending my children into a trap," she said, her voice breaking. "We're not children anymore," Kayla said softly. "Not since she came back into our lives." Alira looked to Kale, who had gone still. "She's right," he murmured. "They're not." Silence fell. Outside, the wind picked up, whistling through the trees like a warning cry. That night, Kale left alone. At least that's what Serana would see. Wrapped in his thickest cloak, sword strapped at his back, he rode into the forest with a torch burning low. His path was slow, deliberate, straight toward the last place he had seen her lantern flicker. Behind him, footsteps remained covered by snow, and shadows followed silently. Alira, cloaked in gray, Darren just behind, carrying a signal flare made of lichen and oil. Aaron and Kayla to the flanks, watching every tree, every breath of wind. Like hawks, they would not strike unless she did, unless she revealed herself. Kale stopped by the frozen creek. The air here was colder, biting. He waited. Minutes passed. Then a whisper, so predictable, came the voice. Soft. Close. Serana emerged from the trees, her gown trailing like mist, her face pale as the snow. A dagger glinted at her hip. "You came alone," she said, smiling. "How noble. Or perhaps just stupid." Kale's heart pounded in his chest. "I didn't come to fight." "No," she said. "You came to fall." In one swift motion, she raised her hand. A glint of metal. A dart flew through the air, but Kale turned just in time. The dart grazed his shoulder, burning hot. Poison. His knees buckled slightly, and from the trees, Kayla's voice rang out, "Now!" Flames erupted from the right as Darren lit the flare, the fire blazing high into the sky. The light threw shadows everywhere, disorienting, blinding. Aaron lunged from behind, grabbing Serana's arm and twisting hard. She shrieked, eyes wide with shock. "What?" Alira stepped from the trees then, her face calm, her eyes unforgiving. "I told you," she said, "come near my family again, and I will end this." Serana tried to break free, pulling a second blade from her sleeve. But Kale was already on his feet. He grabbed her wrist. Mid-swing, his grip firm despite the poison in his blood. "Enough," he growled. Their eyes locked. Serana's face twisted, not with rage, but with betrayal. "You chose them?" she spat. "No," Kale said quietly. "I chose me, and I'm not yours." Serana screamed and lunged, but Alira was faster. One swift movement. The dagger she carried, not Kale's, not Serana's, but her own, found its mark. Serana gasped. Her body fell to the snow, red spreading beneath her like a flower. No one spoke. The snow fell softly again, slowly burying the wound. Kayla turned to Alira, her hands trembling. Is she? Alira knelt, checked Serana's pulse, then closed the woman's eyes. She's gone. Kale collapsed to his knees, gasping. The poison still surged, but the moment held him frozen. Darren moved quickly, applying the salve Alira had prepared earlier. We have to get him home. They moved as one family, no longer hiding, no longer hunted. And as the trees closed behind them, the wind carried no threat, only silence. Alira stood by the hearth, stirring a simmering pot of herbs. The smell of mint and ash clung to the air. Behind her, Kale lay on a bed of furs, pale and sweating, but breathing. His skin had regained some of its color. The poison hadn't reached his heart, thanks to Darren's fast hands and Alira's knowledge, but it had left him fragile, unsteady, and quiet. The children were scattered across the cottage. Kayla sat by the window, her knees pulled to her chest, staring into the woods. Aaron was outside, pacing slow circles around the perimeter like a soldier on duty. And Darren had fallen asleep over his open book, slumped at the table, ink smudging his cheek. Alira tasted the broth. Her hands shook. Kale stirred behind her. Is it dawn? She turned. Closer to noon. He smiled faintly. Feels like I've been asleep a year. You've only been quiet a day, she said, setting the bowl beside him. But maybe that's a record. His chuckle turned into a cough, and she was at his side before the sound had faded. She helped him sit up, steadying his back with one hand, offering the broth with the other. I should have taken her more seriously, he muttered between sips. All those years with her, I knew what she was capable of. I just didn't think she'd come this far. Alira looked at him, her eyes tired but clear. She didn't come for you. Kale blinked. She came for them, Alira said, because that's the only part of you she never controlled. Kale's throat worked as he tried to speak, but he couldn't. She took the bowl from his trembling hands and set it aside. I buried her last night, she said softly, under the black pine by the stream. You did it alone? I had to. No one else should carry that weight. He looked at her, his voice barely audible. Do you hate me? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached forward and brushed a curl of damp hair from his brow. Her hand lingered a second longer than necessary. No, she said. I did. Once. I wanted to. But hate rots the same way love heals. And I had too many hearts to keep alive. He closed his eyes, and for a moment he looked so much younger. I should have stayed, he whispered. The night I sent you away, I should have followed you to the gates. I should have listened. She nodded, her own voice trembling. But you didn't. I lost everything. No, she said. You lost yourself. We were always still here. His eyes opened slowly. And now, she met his gaze. I don't know, she said, but we're not lost anymore. And maybe that's enough for now. A creak above them. Kayla stood at the top of the stairs. Her voice floated down, small and quiet. Is he okay? Kale turned his head, weak but awake. Getting there. She came down slowly, each step careful. She stopped a few feet from the bed. Are you staying this time? She asked. Kale didn't answer immediately. He sat up straighter. I will never leave you again. Kayla studied him. Even if you get sick? Even if someone else comes? Even then? She nodded once. Good, because Darren made us a new plan. For if anything like this happens again. Kale raised a brow. He did. And Aaron sharpened all the traps around the east field, just in case. A tiny smile tugged at his lips. You all became warriors while I was gone. No, Kayla said. We became us. While you were gone. Her voice cracked, just barely, and she turned away before the tears could fall. Kale reached for Alira's hand. She's more like you than me. She's both of us, Alira said. All of them are. That night, the cottage glowed golden with lamplight. Darren and Aaron played chess in the corner, their voices low and teasing. Kayla sat at Kale's side, telling him about every little invention she'd built while he was gone. Traps and pulleys and healing salves that made your skin smell like oranges. Cale listened to every word. Alira sat beside the fire, sewing new cloaks from thick wool. She paused now and then to look around the room, as if memorizing it. This stillness, this wholeness. Cale caught her gaze. He whispered, "Is this real?" She nodded. "It's real," she said, "and it's ours." Outside, the snow fell again. But this time, it didn't feel like a threat. It felt like a closing curtain. A breath. Inside the cottage, the air was different. Warmer, lighter, but not without weight. Cale had regained his strength. He walked without trembling now, carried firewood, taught Aaron how to shift his stance without losing balance. Yet sometimes, when he thought no one was watching, he would pause at the doorway, eyes closed, as if bracing himself against something unseen. One morning, as Alira boiled herbs by the window, Cale approached her quietly. "I want to go back." She turned, the wooden spoon still in her hand. "Back? To Lyren," he said. "Just for a day." She stiffened. The warmth in the room suddenly chilled. "Why?" He hesitated. "Because I need to face what I left behind." Alira placed the spoon down gently. "You think you can just walk back into the city? After what Serana did? After what you did?" "I don't want forgiveness from them," Cale said. "But they need to know the truth. About her. About me. About you." She crossed her arms. "You're not going back there to clear your name." "No," he agreed. "I'm going back to destroy the version of me they still believe in." Her expression shifted, uncertain, wary. "And what if they don't believe you?" "Then I'll still be free," he said. "Because for the first time in years, I won't be hiding behind the man they wanted me to be." Alira studied him, her silence thick with thought. Kayla's voice rang from behind them, small but clear. "Take Darren with you." They both turned. Kayla stood near the stairs, arms crossed, chin high. "He sees everything," she said. "And he remembers. They won't be able to twist your words with him there." Alira opened her mouth to protest. But Darren stepped forward, book in hand. "I want to go," he said softly. "Not to protect you, Father. To witness it." Cale smiled faintly. "That's more than enough." The road to Lyren was clearer now, though the sky still held the weight of winter. Cale and Darren rode in silence for most of the journey. The boys' eyes scanned everything. The thinning trees, the distant farms, the towering gates of the city that finally rose like stone teeth over the horizon. As they passed through the outer walls, Cale felt the old weight settle on his shoulders again. Titles, whispers, 1,000 eyes pretending not to look. Lyren hadn't forgotten him, and it hadn't forgiven him either. At the palace gates, they were stopped. Cale raised his hood. "Tell Chancellor Wren that Lord Cale has returned." The guards hesitated. Then one of them paled and rushed inside. Minutes later, the gates opened with a heavy groan. Inside the council hall, the fire burned low, casting tall shadows over marble floors. Noblemen shifted in their chairs, their silks rustling like dry leaves. Cale stepped in first. Darren followed, quiet but firm, clutching a small scroll in his hand. Wren, older now, rose slowly from his place near the high seat. "Lord Cale," he said, "we heard rumors, but this—" "I am no longer Lord," Cale said. "Not of title, not of land." Whispers rippled through the room. Wren's eyes narrowed. "And yet you return." "I return to speak truth," Cale said, "of the woman you trusted, and the family I betrayed." "You dare speak of Serana?" Another voice called out. "She claimed you'd gone mad, that you'd abandoned us for some witch and her bastard children." Cale's jaw tightened. "She lied." And then he opened the scroll in Darren's hand. It bore Serana's seal. A letter she had written to an assassin, never sent, but found among her belongings after her death. The council went still. As Cale read aloud, each word tore the old lies apart. Plots, poison, manipulations, proof. When he finished, the silence was suffocating. Wren's voice trembled. "You brought this boy here to what, shame us? Kale looked to Darren. The boy stepped forward. I came to remind you that power means nothing if it buries the truth, Darren said. You sat silent while my mother was cast out. You profited while my siblings were forgotten. But we survived. We thrived. And now you answer to us. The nobles looked away. Shame. Fear. We're both. Kale placed a small wooden bird on the table, the one Kayla had given him. My daughter carved this, from a branch in exile, stronger than any seal or sword, because it's real. He turned to leave. Darren followed, but paused at the door. My name is Darren Ellerin Kale, he said, and I am not afraid of you. Then they were gone. Outside, the sky began to lighten just barely. Kale exhaled for the first time in hours. Darren looked up at him. Did you mean it? About not being Lord? Kale nodded. That version of me died long ago. And the new one? Darren asked. Kale placed a hand on his shoulder. He's still learning, but he knows where home is now. They rode toward the horizon, toward the cottage, the woods, the family that had made him real again. And behind them, in the halls of power, a throne sat silent. Alira was outside, chopping kindling when she saw them. She didn't run. She didn't cry. She just set the axe down slowly and met them halfway. Darren dismounted first. He didn't say a word. He didn't need to. The way he looked at her, the way he nodded, told her everything. Kale approached a moment later. His shoulders were squared, but not with pride. With purpose. They listened, he said. Not all of them, but enough. Alira searched his face. And did they believe you? Some did. The rest, I don't care anymore. She studied him carefully, then reached out and touched his sleeve. How does it feel? She asked softly. To be free of them? He said. Strange. Like I cut off a limb that had already been rotting. He smiled just a little. But I feel lighter. Good, she said. Because you're going to need your strength. He frowned. Why? She turned toward the house. Come. They want to talk to you. Inside, the fire was burning bright, and the children were waiting. Kayla stood in front of the hearth, her arms crossed, lips pressed into a firm line. Aaron leaned against the wall, quiet and unreadable. Darren moved to stand beside his siblings, slipping back into place without hesitation. Kale looked at them all, unsure if he should sit, speak, or wait. Kayla answered the question for him. We need to know something. Kale nodded. Anything. Why us? She asked. You could have started over, found peace somewhere else. Why come back to us? After everything. Kale stepped closer, his voice steady but low. Because you were never the mistake. Walking away was. Believing I could bury my past was. But you three, and your mother, you are the only part of me worth keeping. Kayla didn't blink. So what do you want now? Kale's breath caught. I want to stay. I want to build something with you, not as a lord or some distant shadow, but as your father. If you'll have me. Aaron finally spoke. What if you leave again? I won't. How do we know? Kale walked to the table, pulled a dagger from his belt, and held it out, hilt first. Because if I ever do, you won't need to wait for Serana or any enemy. You'll know how to stop me yourselves. They stared at him, not out of fear, but because they believed him. Kayla stepped forward, took the dagger, and set it gently on the table. Then you can stay, she said. But you start over, just like we had to. Kale nodded. That's fair. Darren turned to Alira. What about you? She looked at Kale, at the children, at the cottage, the fire, the shadows that no longer threatened. I never wanted him to come back as a prince, she said. I only wanted him to come back as a man. Kale met her gaze, his eyes burning softly. I'm here, not perfect, not proud, but real. Alira crossed the room and took his hand. We'll build it again, she said. From nothing. No, Kale said, looking around at them all. Not from nothing, from this. He placed his other hand over hers, over the calluses and scars of a woman who never broke, even when everything around her did. That night, the family sat around the fire as they always had. But something had shifted. The silence wasn't filled with tension anymore. It breathed. Kayla rested her head on Alira's shoulder. Darren read aloud from an old book of legends. Aaron quietly carved a new wooden figure. This one not a bird or a blade, but a small figure with 5 joined hands. Kale watched, then looked at Alira. "Will it ever be enough?" he asked. She looked at the children, at the light in their faces. "For the first time," she said. "It already is." He opened it slowly, standing at the edge of the tree line. The words were brief. "You may have fooled them, but not all of us forget. Not all of us forgive." He folded it, heart pounding, scanning the horizon. No one. Not a rider, not a bird. Just the wind, carrying memory like smoke. At dinner that night, he said nothing. But Alira noticed. He barely touched his stew, his fingers tapping the rim of the bowl like a man counting time. "Something's wrong," she said softly, when the children had gone upstairs. Kale didn't look at her. He just pulled the letter from his coat and placed it on the table. She read it once, then again, and then she looked at him, not with fear, but with something colder, clearer. "Who do you think sent it?" He shook his head. "A loyalist. One of the council members, maybe. Someone who benefited from Serana's rise. And what do they want?" He finally looked up. "To remind me that peace is borrowed, and that borrowed things must be returned." Alira stood, walked to the hearth, and tossed the letter into the fire. The flames caught it instantly, curling it to black. "I don't care what they want," she said. "They had their chance to speak when we were suffering. They stayed silent. Now we decide what happens next. But what if they come after you? After the children?" She turned to him, her voice sharp. "Then we don't hide again. We confront them together." Kale watched the letter vanish to ash. He felt something inside him tighten, then release. He reached for her hand. "Alira." She didn't pull away. "I'm not afraid," she said. "Neither am I." A week passed. Then another letter. This one pinned to the barn door with a blade Kale recognized. One from the royal guard. He pulled it free with a slow breath. The parchment was damp from the morning mist. "Justice will not forget, nor sleep forever." No signature. But this time Kale didn't wait to speak. He stormed into the cottage, the blade still clenched in his hand. Alira met him in the kitchen, her face hardening the moment she saw it. He slammed it on the table. "Now it's not just threats. It's symbols. Warnings. Then let's send a message back." He blinked. "What are you saying?" She stepped closer. "We show them we're not hiding. That this family is not waiting to be hunted again." Kale hesitated. "You want to return to Lyran?" "No," she said. "I want Lyran to come here. On our terms. You're not just a man trying to fix a past anymore. You're a father, Kale. And they just threatened your children." His breath caught. She was right. That evening, Kale sat with the children by the fire. Kayla was plucking flower petals and braiding them into strands of thread. Darren was sketching again, plans, maps, routes. Aaron cleaned the blade Kale had taught him to hold. Kale cleared his throat. "I need to tell you something." They looked up. "There may be people, men in Lyran, who don't want us to be at peace, who think we took something from them." Kayla raised her brow. "You mean people like Serana?" "Yes," he said. "Only quieter, but no less dangerous." "Will they come?" Aaron asked. "I don't know." Darren tilted his head. "But if they do?" Kale looked at each of them in turn. "I won't let anything happen to you." Kayla folded the thread once more. "You're not the only one ready to protect this family now." Kale's eyes burned. "I know." Later that night, when all was still, Kale sat outside alone. The stars above were pale, scattered like embers. He held the royal guard's blade in his hand. The weight of it was familiar, but not comforting. Not anymore. Behind him, the cottage glowed with life. Laughter still echoed from earlier that evening. For once, he hadn't been the ghost in the corner. He was present, and they were whole. He looked down at the blade. then cast it into the fire. Steel hissed as it met the flame. Let them come, he thought. Let them try, because this time he wouldn't run. Cale woke before the others. He moved slowly through the kitchen, collecting his armor piece by piece. Not the regal kind, not the polished silver he once wore at court, but rough, worn leathers. Ones that bore the creases of real battle, not ceremony. Alira stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching him. "Are you leaving?" He shook his head, strapping the final buckle at his chest. "No, I'm preparing." "For what?" He turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes she hadn't seen before. Not fear, not pride, just clarity. "I know who's coming," he said. "I recognized the handwriting in the last letter." She straightened. "Who?" "Lord Varric, one of Serana's oldest allies. He's more than a loyalist. He's the architect of everything I didn't see. The one who helped her twist the council. And now, he thinks he can unmake what we've built." "And you think he'll come himself?" "I know he will. He's too proud to send someone else. And too bitter to forget what I took from them." Alira stepped closer. "Then we won't wait. We set the traps, we call the allies we have, and we meet him on our land. Not as frightened exiles. As a family." Cale looked at her with awe. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Good," she said. "Then you'll fight harder to keep us." By noon, the children were armed. Not with swords, but with strategy. Darren redrew the map of the surrounding woods, marking high ground, sight lines, escape routes. "We use the bluff," he explained, voice calm but urgent. "They'll approach from the east, thinking it's the softest path. But if we control the ridge, we see them first." Kayla sorted the salves and oils Alira had prepared. "If anyone gets hurt, we don't panic. We treat. We protect." Aaron checked the tension in every bow, the balance of every blade. "When they come close," he said, "we don't wait. We strike first. Clean, sharp, fast." Cale watched them move like a unit, focused, precise. Children of no kingdom, born in exile, raised by resilience. He felt something grow in his chest, something bigger than pride. Love, the kind that terrifies. As dusk fell, the trap was ready. The bluff was quiet, moonlight casting long silver shadows through the trees. Cale stood beside Darren at the ridge, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade. "They'll be here soon," Darren said. "We made sure of it." Cale looked at him. "Are you afraid?" "Yes," the boy replied. "But I'm also angry. They never paid for what they did." "Not really." "They will," Cale said. "Tonight." Below them, hoofs cracked against frostbitten earth. Figures emerged from the tree line. Silent, armored, eyes gleaming like wolves. Varric rode at the center, his face gaunt and cold, the silver in his beard like the edge of a dagger. Cale stepped into view, sword drawn, voice like iron. "You don't belong here." Varric raised a hand, and his riders halted behind him. "I belong wherever power still speaks," he said. "You are nothing now, Cale. A ghost pretending to be a man. I'm more of a man now than you ever were. You abandoned everything we built." "No," Cale growled. "I saved everything you tried to destroy." Varric's smile was slow and cruel. "Then let's see if your new kingdom bleeds the same." He gave the signal. His men surged forward. And from the ridge, flames erupted. Darren's traps lit the edge of the path, blinding the horses. Arrows flew from Kayla and Aaron's flanks, precise and merciless. The first wave stumbled, fell. Confusion spread like wildfire. Cale leapt down the ridge, sword meeting steel with a scream of sparks. He didn't fight with grace. He fought with purpose. Every strike was for the years stolen from his wife. Every block for the childhoods lost to silence. Every step forward was a vow. "You will not take this from me." It didn't last long. The traps, the planning, the fire, Varric's men weren't prepared. They retreated fast, some dragging the wounded, others leaving them behind. Varric tried to run, but Cale found him, pushed him to the ground beneath the black pine. "Please," Varric gasped. She lied to us. She lied to me. Kale pressed the tip of his blade to the man's throat. And you chose to believe her. He didn't kill him. He didn't have to. When Kale stood, Varric stayed on his knees, shaking. By the time dawn came, the threat was over, and Kale stood once more before his family. Bloody, bruised, but alive. I didn't win, he said quietly. We did. Alira stepped forward. You're not the man I married. I know. You're better now. He took her hand. Then Kayla's. Then the others. The sun broke over the horizon, golden and warm. And for the first time, Kale realized the future wasn't something to chase anymore. Kale has returned. The one who left a kingdom behind. The man who made enemies flee into the trees. Kale stood at the door with Alira, watching them gather like a tide he didn't know how to stop. They're not angry, Alira said beside him. Not yet. He nodded, his mouth dry. But they don't trust me, he said. They don't have to. They'll trust what they see. She touched his hand once, brief, grounding, and then stepped back inside, leaving him to face the weight of everything he had been. The crowd settled into a hush. Kale took one slow breath and stepped forward. I know who I was, he began, and I know what was said of me, that I left a queen for a courtesan, that I ruled with coin instead of conscience, that I abandoned the woman who bore my children. He paused, and every word of it was true. There was a stir in the crowd, uneasy shifting, glances exchanged. But that's not the end of my story. Not anymore. He raised his voice, not with arrogance, but with raw, shaking honesty. Serana is gone. Her allies fell trying to destroy what I built here. And I stood in the fire I helped create and chose to stay. Not to reclaim a crown, not to buy forgiveness, but to earn the right to look my children in the eye. A voice rose from the crowd. A young man Kale recognized from the southern fields. And what do you want from us? Kale met his gaze. Nothing, he said. I came to offer something instead. He looked around at the worn homes beyond the trees, the tired eyes, the hands calloused from years of being unseen. I have wealth, land, connections I left behind, and I want to use them for this place for you, not as your lord, not as your ruler, but as a man repaying a debt to the soil that gave me back my soul. The villagers looked at one another. Another voice spoke. How do we know you won't leave again? Kayla's voice rang clear from the cottage steps. Because we won't let him. She stepped forward, head high. He's not just a man anymore. He's ours. And if he forgets that, he answers to us. Darren joined her. Then Aaron. Then Alira, stepping beside them. A family not forged by politics or power, but by pain, by growth, by survival. The silence broke into murmurs, then nods. Then someone stepped forward, the old blacksmith, and said, Then let him build something that stays, not just words. Kale smiled, quietly. I will. Over the next weeks, the transformation began. Kale worked with his hands, clearing brush, repairing roofs, lifting stones for a new bridge. He bled beside them. He listened. He didn't speak of gold or war. He spoke of irrigation, of trade, of teaching Kayla how to treat wounds with more than instinct. At night, the fire in the cottage burned with laughter again. One evening, Alira came to him, her hands dusted with flour, her sleeves rolled to her elbows. You've changed, she said, handing him a warm cup of tea. So have you, he replied, meeting her eyes. But in the ways that matter, you've stayed exactly the same. She sat beside him. The fire cast her face in gold and shadow. I used to dream about you coming back, she said softly, and I hated myself for it, because you didn't deserve the door staying open. I didn't, he whispered, and yet you're here. He reached out carefully, slowly. She didn't pull away. I'm here because of you, he said. Because of them. Because I realized that no kingdom is worth ruling if you have to do it alone. She leaned her head against his shoulder, and for a long time they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Outside, the stars burned quietly. The land was still healing. So were they. But something real had taken root. Not power, not penance. A beginning. There were no marble pillars or robed judges. No echoing halls filled with silent lords watching from the shadows. It happened instead beneath the wide boughs of the ash tree at the center of the village square, where spring flowers now bloomed in defiance of a long, bitter winter. The people gathered, some standing, some seated on benches hastily carved from fallen logs. Children sat in their parents' laps, hushed by the tension humming in the air. The ash tree bore witness, ancient and impartial. Cale stood in the center, not as a noble, not in armor, just in the plain, earth-toned tunic of a farmer. Behind him sat Alira, Kayla, Aaron, and Darren. No one said it aloud, but everyone knew whatever judgment was spoken here today would be about all of them. Not just a man, but the family that rose from the wreckage of his choices. Chancellor Wren had made the journey from Lyran himself. He stood now across from Cale, flanked by 2 city scribes. "The charges," he said clearly, his voice echoing in the open space, "are not of crimes committed by sword or theft, but of betrayal, desertion of duty, abandonment of office, and failure to protect the realm when it needed guidance most." Cale did not flinch. "I do not deny any of it." Wren blinked. "You admit to dereliction?" "I admit to being a coward," Cale said. "I admit to chasing power when I should have stayed, to silencing the voices that warned me, to believing a throne meant more than a home. But if this trial is to mean anything, it must also look at what I've done since." "And what have you done?" Wren asked. "Besides hide, I rebuilt, not palaces or armies, but trust, brick by brick. I raised my children with my hands in the soil. I fought back the men Serana sent. I turned down the crown they tried to return to me, and I did it not for redemption, but because I learned." Wren stepped forward, his tone sharpened. "And what if the kingdom needs you again? Will you walk away like before?" Cale looked past him to the people. "I won't return to the throne. I've made that clear, but I'll never walk away again. If I'm needed, I'll come not to rule, to serve." A murmur spread through the crowd. Then, from the side, a voice rose. Old, firm. It was the blacksmith. "We don't need another crown. We need someone who remembers what it's like to be broken and still build." A woman stood, Alira's former midwife. "And someone who knows how to listen, not just speak." Darren stepped forward now, parchment in hand. "If this trial is about justice, then let's not forget what Serana took from all of us. She used the throne. She turned it into a weapon." Kayla joined him. "And our father turned away from that weapon. That should matter." Aaron didn't speak. He didn't need to. He simply placed a hand on Cale's shoulder. Wren studied them. One man alone could be judged. But a man standing with his family? With a village? That was something else entirely. Finally, the Chancellor raised his hand. "Then let this be the judgment of the realm. Not in ink, not in chains, but in legacy." He turned to the crowd. "Do you accept Cale of Lyran, not as lord, but as a citizen reborn?" One by one, hands raised. Not all, but enough. Enough to say he no longer stood on trial. He stood on soil that welcomed him back. Cale let out a slow breath, one he hadn't realized he'd been holding for years. Wren approached him quietly. "You could have kept running." "I did," Cale replied, "until there was nothing left of me to carry." The Chancellor nodded once. "Then carry this instead." He handed Cale a folded piece of parchment, sealed with wax, but unmarked. Cale broke the seal. It was a decree, a formal exoneration, a document that freed him from any further summons to court. His past, laid to rest by ink and witness. Cale folded it slowly and looked toward Alira, who watched him not with pride, but with peace. Later that night, beneath the stars he sat, with her by the fire outside the cottage. The village had returned to quiet, and the children slept inside. "I thought it would feel more like victory," he said. Alira smiled. "It wasn't a victory. No, it was a homecoming." He looked at her, at the glow of her face in the firelight. Would you still choose me? He asked. Even after everything? She was quiet for a long time. Then, I didn't choose you because you were perfect, Kale. I chose you because I saw what you could become. And tonight, I saw him. He reached for her hand. I want to grow old here. With you. With them. Then you better start planting, she said, nodding toward the garden. He laughed soft, real, and in the warmth of her gaze, under the weight of forgiveness earned, Kale understood at last. Justice wasn't always punishment. He didn't speak much during these walks, not to Alira, not even to the trees, but each step felt like a word he didn't know how to say. One morning, Alira found him standing at the edge of the old stream, the one near the black pine where Serana had once fallen. She stepped beside him. You're not waiting for her ghost, are you? She asked, half teasing. He didn't smile. I keep thinking, he said, voice low. About the night I left you. She stayed quiet. I didn't look back, he continued. Not even once. And now, I wake up every day terrified that one of our children will do the same to me. She turned toward him, her hand brushing the fabric of his sleeve. They won't. You can't know that. Yes, she said, softly but certain. I can. Kale's throat tightened. I don't know how to live without guilt anymore. You're not supposed to, she said. You're supposed to live through it. His eyes shimmered, but the tears didn't fall. They didn't need to. She saw everything already. Later that evening, as the sun sank into the trees, Kayla came to Kale while he was splitting logs behind the cottage. She held something behind her back. What's that? He asked, wiping his brow. She stepped forward, hesitated, then handed it to him. A folded cloth bundle. Inside it was a leather journal, the cover worn and carefully stitched. I made it, she said, eyes not meeting his. For you, so you can write it down. Whatever you remember, or forget. He opened it slowly. The first page was blank, but the second held a single sentence, written in her hand. This is where we begin again. He looked at her, heart full. Thank you. I thought maybe if you wrote it down, you wouldn't be afraid to forget anymore. He knelt to her level, holding the journal gently. I'm afraid all the time, he admitted. Kayla nodded. So are we. But you stayed. That matters more. She turned and walked back inside. Kale sat down on the old bench, journal in hand, and opened it to the third page. He stared at the blank space for a long time, then slowly began to write. A week passed, and one morning, Alira rose to find Kale gone before dawn, as usual. But this time he didn't return. She waited through the morning, through midday. By evening, she saddled her horse without a word and rode out toward the forest. Panic whispered in her ribs like a blade against bone. She found him near the ravine that curved behind the old vineyard, kneeling in the grass. For a moment her heart dropped, until she saw what he was doing. He was planting rows of small, hand-dug holes. Saplings lined beside him, wrapped in cloth and straw. He looked up when he heard her. You didn't tell anyone, she said, voice breathless, half scolding. I didn't think I had to, he said. This isn't for them. She dismounted, walked to him. What is it for? He reached for a sapling, unwrapped it, and gently lowered it into the earth. Roots, he said. So when we're gone, something still stands. She watched him in silence as he filled the hole and patted it down with careful, reverent hands. You think that's enough? She asked. Kale looked at her. No, he said, but it's a start. She knelt beside him, took another sapling, and pressed her fingers into the soil. They worked in silence, the wind rustling through the trees, the sky darkening above them. By nightfall, the saplings stood like tiny promises across the hill, bare, fragile, but real. They sat beneath them, shoulder to shoulder, the scent of earth rich around them. You were right, he said at last. About what? That forgiveness isn't something you're given. It's something you grow. She leaned her head against him. I think maybe we're starting to bloom. Kale closed his eyes, and for the first time in years he didn't feel haunted. He felt planted, ready. He touched the reflection lightly. "I'm not him anymore," he whispered. Behind him, the door creaked open. Alira stepped inside, brushing a curl from her cheek, still damp from the morning air. She watched him silently for a moment before speaking. "You're doing it again." Cale turned. "Doing what?" "Looking for the version of yourself you used to be. He's not coming back." He half smiled. "That's not who I want to find anymore." She stepped closer, touched his shoulder. "Then who are you looking for?" He met her eyes. "The man you said I could become." She studied him. "And have you found him yet?" Cale's voice was soft. "I'm getting closer." She let her hand fall, but her gaze didn't waver. "You should tell them. The children." She nodded. "All of it. Not just your mistakes. Your choice. What you gave up." He sighed, the weight of it sitting in his chest. "They don't need to carry that." "They already do," she said. "You just don't see it yet." That evening, Cale gathered them. The fire crackled gently. The stew simmered. Outside, the sky dimmed into a bruised lavender. Kayla sat curled with a sketchbook, Aaron with his blade balanced across his lap, Darren hunched over a scroll. But when Cale cleared his throat, they all looked up, because they knew this wasn't going to be a small thing. "I need to tell you something," he began. "Something I should have told you long ago." He didn't look at Alira, but he felt her presence behind him. Solid. Ready. "I was offered the throne again," he said. "Weeks ago." Quietly. "The council extended it as a formality after Varek's fall. They said the people would accept me back. They said I'd earned it." The room went still. Kayla blinked. "You didn't tell us." "No," he said, "because I turned it down before I even walked out of the council hall." Darren sat forward. "Why?" "Because I knew if I took it, I'd have to leave this. Again. I'd become someone who belonged to something else. And I can't belong to anything that would keep me from you." Aaron didn't speak, but his shoulders relaxed. Just slightly. Cale looked at them each. "I want you to know, I didn't run from it. I chose this. Chose you. Not because it's easier, but because it's right." Kayla lowered her sketchbook. "But you were born for power." "I was born," he said quietly, "to love and fail and try again. That's all any of us get." Darren crossed his arms. "So what will you do now?" "Live. Help build this village. Finish the bridge. Teach you everything I know." Aaron tilted his head. "Even the hard parts?" "Especially the hard parts." Kayla stood, walked to him, and placed her hand over his heart. "Then don't ever lie again," she said. "Even to protect us." He covered her hand with his own. "I won't." That night, Cale sat by the fire alone. The children had gone to sleep. Alira was upstairs, but he knew she hadn't closed her eyes yet. He could feel her presence above him like gravity. He pulled out the journal Kayla had given him and opened it to a fresh page. He wrote slowly, deliberately. "I was once a king without a crown, a father without a voice, and a man without a path. Now I build with soil and firelight. I listen more than I speak. I stay." The wind whispered outside the windows. He looked toward the door, as if expecting something or someone. But there was no messenger, no summons, no army waiting to reclaim him. Just peace. Earned, not gifted. Cale stepped outside barefoot, the dew soaking through the fabric of his pants. He stood at the edge of the small garden Alira had cultivated, lavender, thyme, sage, all growing in neat rows, resilient and fragrant. He reached down and plucked a single sprig of rosemary. Behind him, Alira's voice came softly through the stillness. "You always wake before the sun now." Cale turned, smiling. "I like to see it rise." She walked to his side, wrapping her shawl a little tighter. "And what do you see when you do?" He looked back at the horizon. "The beginning of everything I thought I'd lost." She didn't answer, but her hand found his. They stood like that for a while, the silence between them rich with memory and things they didn't need to say anymore. Then Cale turned to her. "I've been thinking," he said. "That usually means trouble," she teased gently. He laughed under his breath. "No, not this time." He reached into the small pouch at his waist and pulled out something thin, wrapped in cloth. He unrolled it slowly, a ring, but not the one he had given her years ago, when everything was new and gilded with illusion. This one was simple, silver, worn, forged by hand. "I never gave you back what you deserved," he said, his voice low, thick. "I gave you exile, silence, and years of being alone when I should have been your shelter." She looked down at the ring, then up into his eyes. "But you gave me them," she whispered, glancing toward the window where soft shadows moved. Kayla probably stretching in her bed. "And in the end, you came home." Kale reached for her hand. "I don't want to rebuild a kingdom," he said. "I want to build a life. With you. No thrones. No crowns. Just us. Just the land, the work, and the love I never stopped carrying. Even when I was too broken to speak it." She stared at him, tears pooling in her eyes but not falling. Her fingers trembled. "You don't have to ask." "I do," he said softly. "Because this time I need to hear you say yes, not out of duty or desperation, but because you still believe in me." She looked at him, at the man who had walked away, and then returned not as a savior, but as a partner. And with a smile trembling through her tears, she whispered, "Yes." Kale slid the ring onto her finger, and her hand closed over his. A sudden cheer broke the stillness. They turned to see Kayla, Aaron, and Darren at the window, faces pressed to the glass, grinning. Kayla opened the window and shouted, "Finally!" Aaron chuckled. "Took him long enough." Darren smirked. "I had my doubts." Kale laughed, a sound full and free. "You've all been conspiring against me." "Only a little," Alira said, wiping her cheek. Kayla opened the door and ran outside, barefoot like her father, and threw her arms around them both. "Does this mean we're a real family now?" she asked, muffled in Kale's coat. Alira smiled down at her. "We always were. This just makes it official." Darren and Aaron joined them, and for a moment, the five of them stood in the middle of the garden, wrapped in the mist and the rosemary and the light of a morning that felt like something sacred. Kale looked at them all, each one a miracle born from his greatest mistake and his most desperate hope. And he realized something. He hadn't just come home. He was home. He looked at Alira, at the children, and whispered, "Let's plant more." Alira laughed. "What now?" "Everything. Trees, vines, grapes, olives, a future." Kayla grinned. "Can I design the vineyard sign?" "Yes," Kale said, eyes bright. "And you can name it, too." Darren raised an eyebrow. "What would you even call a vineyard that rose from ashes?" Kayla tapped her chin. The second bloom." Everyone went still for a moment. Then Kale nodded slowly. "That's perfect. The second bloom." The name whispered through the village, through neighboring farms, through traders who came bearing spices and stories. What they found when they arrived was more.